We'd like to welcome everyone to the 2012 Out and Equal University Harassed in the Workplace Lessons from Schoolyard Bullying webinar. This is part 3 of our webinar series, and we've got about 10 people on the line so far. We are going to be talking today with our presenters, David Hall and Melissa Reagan, but we're also going to bring some panelists in. Alana Betts and Tammy Lynn are on the line. We're hoping Chris will join us. I'm Pat Bailey, Director of Training, and your moderator today. A couple of announcements just on things coming up. This is the third part of our session, and starting on June 5th, we'll have another Out and Equal University course on leadership coaching. Some of our coaches who have been working have put together a 3-part seminar to work on that. And then, of course, we have Pride coming up and looking at some of our executives on that. On the webinars here, we'll mute your lines during the presentation, but you can always chat and ask questions, or if you have any technical problems, you can raise your hands here, and we'll contact you and see what's happening with that. Chat here and chat then. And if you have a poll, we'll be doing answer the question and then hit submit. We had somebody join us from 773. Who's that? Is that you, Chris?
No, this is Aaron Tolbart.
Hi, Aaron. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Sounds good. All right. And so with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to you, David. Let me mute all the lines first here, and I'll unmute you and Melissa to start with.
The conference has been muted.
Good afternoon, for where I'm calling from at least, here on the East Coast. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to those on the West Coast. I am happy to be working with you on part 3 of our workplace bullying sessions. We're going to start out with Melissa and I just providing an overview with myself of session 1 and Melissa of session 2. We started session 1 by taking a look at the schoolwork parallel for what are some of the statistics that we see in common between workplace bullying and school-based bullying. What are the myths that we see about bullies having low self-esteem, and how does that get in the way of our impact on workplace bullying prevention or school bullying prevention? We looked at different facets of bullying, where what does explicit aggression look like, what does implicit aggression look like. Then we did a skills building activity where we worked on identifying some of those different scenarios. We then took a look at a more concrete tie between the role of workplace bullying and workplace diversity. We had a scenario about cyberbullying that we took a look at. Then we spent some time on the impact of bystanders that they have. What bystanders could do if they want to intervene, and what are some concrete steps that bystanders could take in the future. So that was an overview of session 1. Melissa, would you like to lead us through a few pieces about session 2?
Sure. Hi, this is Melissa Reagan. It's great to be with everyone. I'm excited about our third session here, and looking forward to seeing how we're going to pull all this stuff together into some concrete examples of how to make things better in the workplace and in the schoolyard. So in session 2, we really launched from where we ended in session 1, and this concept of bystanders and the importance of bystanders in helping to create a culture that really has no tolerance for bullying. And we kind of dissected that a little bit. Like, what does it really take to be that, to go from being a bystander to someone who takes action? And we looked at this framework of it kind of requires each individual to, first of all, have empathy for the person being bullied, and potentially even for the bully and for themselves, but just to have empathy for the situation, and then to understand that something is going on that needs to be intervened, and then knowing how to take action, what action to take, knowing what's appropriate and feeling safe to take that action. So we looked at the concept of power and how bullying is really a repeated abuse of a power differential that causes harm, and we looked at some work that some sociologists had done about the nature of power, and that it has a disinhibiting effect, that power doesn't necessarily corrupt, but it kind of disinhibits us to be more of the person that we really are, and sort of stops us from paying attention to some social cues that we might otherwise pay attention to. And so that can reduce empathy. So we spent some time thinking about our own power. We also looked at some rough cuts of a new documentary film that I'm working on about one particular school and parent community, and how they're looking at power and bullying and being an ally and even potentially a superhero within a K-8 environment. And so we watched some of that footage, and we kind of learned from the students how they're articulating, sometimes very clearly, some of these concepts, and looking at conflict resolution skills, discerning between being aggressive, passive, and assertive, and at the end, hopefully giving us the start of a new language and a fundamental tool set that can enable the communication and self-reflection that's necessary to evolve as an individual and as a community on these issues.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Melissa. What I want us to do now is walk through, we're going to have some questions for our panel, which we didn't get a chance to, we'll introduce them in just a moment. Before we introduce our panel, what I would like to do is I would like to take a look at a couple polling questions that we have up here. And the first question I want us to, each person answer is, how important of an issue is bullying in schools? Extremely important. Can everybody take a moment and vote, please? Okay, looks like we have consensus. All 8 of us are voting on extremely important for those who voted. And how important of an issue is workplace bullying? Okay, it appears that our responses are a little bit more varied on this one. We don't exactly have the same number of voting. That's the problem in America. Too many people don't vote. But we're evenly split between extremely important, very important, and then there's a little bit of representation at moderately important as well. What I want to take a look at is we took a look at how what the parallels were with statistics in the first one. We took a look at examples. I want us to take a look at what our culture might look like in terms of workplace bullying. What do we see in schools, and what do we see in the workplace? And so Melissa and I are joined today by 2 wonderful experts. And Chris Colombana, as you'll see listed there, but his picture's not there. Chris isn't feeling well. Chris is with Safeway and is unfortunately unable to join us today. But you do see pictures for Elena Betts and Tammy Lynn. Elena is a school official in suburban Philadelphia, and Tammy works at DuPont. So I want to give each person a chance to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their background and what brings them here with us today. Elena, would you be willing to start?
Sure. Well, my name is Ilana Betts, and I'm employed as a school psychologist as David had mentioned, in southeastern Pennsylvania. I have also worked in domestic violence center, social services agency, and also I've done counseling in employee assistance agencies. Currently I'm working on a doctorate in adult education, and my research interests are LGBTQ cultural competency for mental health professionals. And so that is my focus in my day-to-day job as well. And I think that's about it.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy?
Hi, I'm Tammy Lynn. I'm actually an R&D technologist at the DuPont plant in New Johnsonville, Tennessee. I'm also co-leader of the Be Glad group, which is the DuPont ERG for LGBT employees, and have been so for about 5 years, I think, and so have been actively involved in Out and Equal workshops and some of the other work we've done, with other groups too. And I'm really interested in the bullying thing because I just think it's something that is getting worse, and especially the workplace bullying. It just doesn't seem to be on everybody's radar, and I think it's time for that to change.
Excellent. Excellent. Great. Well, we're going to have questions today that are both related to school issues and work issues. We're having some technical difficulties, so one of the things that we're going to send out to our participants is a couple of YouTube links for some streaming videos. We're going to play a couple today. Before I ask the panel about school-based issues and workplace issues to talk about them both, I'm going to play a song, and the video is on YouTube for you to be able to see, and I would recommend you take a look at it. I find out of all of the It Gets Better clips that I have shared with students in my high school Gay Straight Alliance that this is by far the favorite one that they have seen, which actually I learned about. They shared it with me in the first place. Now, if anyone's unfamiliar with It Gets Better, Dan Savage posted a video, an It Gets Better video, that kind of said, don't worry about it, I know life is tough, but it gets better as you get older. And the response has been a phenomenal response in the videos that were produced. Most of them are testimonials of people sharing their experiences, but some of them are incredibly powerful songs that people have put together. So what I'm going to have us do, and I'm just going to have us listen since we don't have the benefit of the video, but we're going to listen to Rebecca Drysdale, who has a music video on YouTube called It Gets Better, and you can download the song onto your iPhone as well through iTunes.
Amanda is in gym class where the kids go to get fit, but her eye's not on the ball at all, it's on Miss Foster's tit. She's got a dirty little secret that everybody knows. She came out but she wishes she had left the closet closed. And here is little Davy hiding in the piano room, playing Wicked, Rent, Chicago, Cats, and Brigadoon. He's hiding from the locker room and jocks who roam the hall, where he's safe from wedgie shiners and destruction of his ball. But when they call you weirdos, fags, and rejects, flamers, gays, and hags, baby dykes and homo types, lesbos, homos, and queer bags, it might seem like it's hopeless and will never be okay, but listen to the ones who can't believe them when they say it gets better. Someday you'll look back and you won't give a fuck, and you're swimming through your pussy smell like cruise fucking McDuck. And when you're snatching your first Grammy, super glammy looking slick, it won't be much time till they get in line for a chance to suck your dick. It gets better. It wasn't long till they told Johnny that he wasn't normal, when he wore a strapless gown and high heels to his junior formal. But the cool guys, they felt passionately that his chosen fashion was a rationalization for a rash of Johnny fashion. Everyone made...
Okay, I'm not going to play the whole song. Listen to it at another point, but it gives you an idea. And one of the things that it strikes me is that, like a lot of adults, I was incredibly moved by the Joel Burns video, which is how a lot of people actually first saw a lot of It Gets Better, even though Dan Savage kind of went first. But one of the things that I had found is that in looking at this is that I found with Drysdale that it spoke to my students in a different way. And I think one of the reasons it spoke to my students in a different way is she uses the language and the harassment that kids experience in schools all too often. And I'm very appreciative of her sharing that. It's a very powerful song to listen to. You only heard the first two verses. The one thing to be aware of is while violence is mentioned throughout, the child who is the victim of the greatest incidents of violence is the second verse that you heard, and that's the boy who attends the prom dressed in traditionally female clothing, and he experienced some of the greatest hatred and anger that he can see. And I think that might speak to part of why people rate school-based bullying as a more significant threat than workplace bullying, because the consequences are higher. This is where we see higher rates of suicide and the pain of isolation in the closet. So let me turn to our panel, and I'm going to ask if folks can chime in. And Alana, since you went first the last time, I'll ask Tammy if you can go first and talk about why workplace bullying is an important issue for you and for schools.
Well, I think it's equally important. I know we're getting unbelievable numbers of suicides in kids. It just breaks my heart every time I hear another story. But there's also the aspect of, folks bringing guns into their workplace and shooting their coworkers because of these kinds of issues. And so I do think that there's violence that is a part of the workplace bullying and the school bullying. But, the bottom line to me for a company, for productivity, if a company wants 100% performance out of its workers, they're going to have to feel safe and happy at their jobs. And if you're being bullied, you're not bringing 100% of yourself to work. You've got fear and anger, and you tend to not pay attention to what you're doing. And so, that's the approach I like to take with companies is, this is going to get you better productivity if you get this behavior to stop.
Excellent. Thanks, Tammy. Lana, how about you? Can you add some of your perspectives about why this is important?
Sure, yeah. And I definitely agree with everything that Tammy had also shared. Bullying, for me, is very important because in the school system, the students who typically get more frequently bullied are students who identify as LGBTQ. And what studies are showing now, finally, the things that we've seen, those of us who work in the school system, is that this leads to students who identify as being LGBTQ having lower grade point averages, they're less likely to attend colleges, and having higher truancy rates because they're not feeling safe in the school system. And of course, it's important for schools to be safe places for all students. And I think that the things that happen in school carry us through adulthood. And the things that we learn in school and learn about interacting with people, with others in schools, we do carry with us into the workplace.
Hey, and I'm also curious about your background with dating and domestic violence. And I've always seen a lot of parallels between the research that I see about bullying and the research that I've seen about dating and domestic violence.
Yeah.
And some of the parallels that I see is that's another area that's hard to get attention in the workplace, too. Even though there's a real cost in the workplace, part of what I see is there's a heavy amount of blaming the victim that occurs. What could you do differently to keep that from occurring? To what degree do you see, but you have a much more grassroots understanding of what you've seen in your domestic violence work and the workplace bullying. What kind of parallels do you see there?
Well, one of the things that in working in domestic violence that we're very careful of doing is this discussion about power that we talked about last time. And one of the things that we have to work really hard to do, it could be very easy to do when working with people who are experiencing domestic violence, is to say, well, in this situation you need to act in this certain way. But when we do that, we're also negating their power to have knowledge and to control the situation. So we bring them knowledge and encourage them to be aware of their knowledge and act in a way that is best suited for themselves. And I do see that parallel with bullying issues as well, because I think a lot of times people are not necessarily people who are victims of bullying are not necessarily aware of their power and the things that they can do to change their situation. So I definitely also see parallels.
Excellent. Thank you. Then, Melissa, do you want to chime in about some of the things that this means to you in your work with, as a filmmaker, your work with schools, your work with Out and Equal?
Yeah, absolutely. Where to start here? So it's interesting for me because I'm incredibly touched by so many of the often terrifying stories of extreme bullying that have severe consequences. I guess I personally feel lucky that I don't live in that space. I was never severely bullied, but I kind of exist in this sort of vague middle space where I'm maybe as a woman, as someone who was a woman in an engineering field, a minority as a lesbian, minority in lots of different ways, always sort of wondering if I am asserting my power as fully as I could be. Is someone abusing their power against me? How do I stand up for myself? And then, the work that we did with No Dumb Questions, that film about 3 little girls whose uncle was becoming a woman and kind of modeling the really awesome way this one family had open dialogue, how do we encourage people to have an open dialogue and air their kind of gnarled up feelings of, fear and ignorance and things that if not aired properly and kind of worked through could turn into some more severe feelings of hatred and various forms of abuse. So for me, I guess in my work, it's I always tell people that I make documentary films instead of going to therapy, and I tend to sort of work on issues that I myself am very curious and interested in. So this has been one for me, and I guess in a way it all comes down to power, but it also all comes down to just treating people as people and being willing to laugh at ourselves. And so I'm really interested in as we get into these more severe things of things gone wrong with relationships, more severe versions of that, how can we bring some of that fundamental, like, okay, guys, let's all just be human here and sort of start over. So I'm, again, just really interested to hear all the specific examples that are going to come up today and kind of how we might loop all this stuff together.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so one of the first questions I want to start with are stories. And let me explain for everyone listening why I wanted to start with stories is that the way the general public learns about bullying today is entirely with stories. Anderson Cooper does some brilliant stuff, but that stuff almost stops and ends at telling a story, powerful stories that I'm glad I learned. The movie Bully is a powerful movie, but it stops and ends at telling the story. And in all honesty, the solutions that are in there aren't my favorite solutions. You got to be nice to each other, and there's some research that shows us some things that we can do that is particularly effective. But we do a lot about stories, and so what I like to do, and if anybody see my blogs on CNN, what I've been asked to do there is to link stories with bullying to research. But I want to start by talking about some stories because we all have those, and those are one of the best methods for education about bullying that I've come across. Ilana, can you share a particular story about bullying that has moved you?
It was definitely hard for me to think of a specific story because I think each time you hear one of these stories, it's very moving. And but I do think that one thing that strikes me is we're hearing these stories, younger and younger bullying stories, and how they're being affected, how people are being affected by bullying in schools. And I think that the one that really moved me was the bullying situation with Seth Walsh, who was just 13 years old when he committed suicide because he had come out as being gay and was being bullied in school and was not able to handle it. And I mean, one of the things that we are continually being enlightened is that children are coming out earlier and earlier, and I think along with that is difficulty in professionals really reaching out to students and knowing how to really support them through the process.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Very powerful. Tammy, how about you?
I was thinking about this question, and I can't pinpoint any of the ones, the recent ones, because there have been so many, and they just all are so just heartbreaking. It tears my heart out to hear these children really killing themselves. And so I decided to share my own personal bullying story because it probably is why I do a lot of the work I do with the DuPont Be Glad group and some of the other stuff I do. When I was 11 or so, it was in the early 70s, and of course you could tell from my accent I'm from the South. And I had African American friends, and I always did have African American friends. I didn't understand the difference. My parents tried to point out the differences, and other people tried to tell me that I shouldn't have black friends, and I never really got that. I've kind of decided I must have been an alien dropped in Kentucky, But so, you know, as time went on and people kept trying to tell me that that wasn't right and that wasn't right, finally there was a group of, and I can't remember specifically, it was 4 or 5 boys who decided to teach me a lesson. And they caught me off by myself and decided to beat me up. Well, they found out that, you know, I might be a sweet little Southern girl, but I'm also a barracuda if you back me into a corner. And so, but while they were holding me down trying to beat me up, they were calling me Tom and N-lover and all these just awful names just because I had black friends. And you know, of course I fought back, and they never bothered me again because they realized that, you know, bullies don't like to be fought, you know, they don't like it when you fight back. And so that experience just made me much more determined to stand up for myself and to stand up for people who don't have a voice. And so that's kind of my bullying story.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. It's incredibly powerful and courageous for you to share a personal story like that. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Melissa, do you have a piece to add to this?
Thanks for sharing that story. And, you know, the stories that I was going to talk about, you know, while there's, you know, obviously a lot of terrible stories out on the news that have moved me very deeply, I think I was moved most deeply this weekend when I was talking to my mother about all this work that I'm doing now with bullying. And she told me about, well, you know, your youngest sister was bullied when she was in middle school, and I didn't know that. And my heart broke. And, you know, I don't think it didn't drive her to suicide. There were no severe, long-lasting consequences that I know of. But, you know, there was a time when one particular girl turned against her and got all the other girls to turn against her. And she didn't want to go to school. She was afraid to go to school. And my mother said, well, I'll go with you. And she said, no, you can't do that. That would be worse. And it was just, you know, it's not the worst story of bullying that I've ever heard, but the fact that it was someone that I love so dearly and feel very protective of, I think it hit a very tender spot in me. And that's something that I really hadn't experienced yet in this last couple of years of dealing with these issues. And I think that's important to keep in mind, that all of us who either have experienced this directly or love someone who has experienced it are kind of interpreting all of this work in a very different way. And then the other story I wanted to share was sort of the exact opposite, and it's a story that sort of dumbfounded me. I was visiting some family in the southern United States in the last year, and we were talking about bullying, and a male relative of mine was recounting the best years of his life that he spent at work out in the fields, with his male colleagues who would tease each other relentlessly. And some of this teasing, I would think, like, legally counts as harassment and bullying. And it's just the things that these guys would do to each other just over and over again, and getting under each other's skin and driving some of them to tears. And to him, to my relative, these were the best years of his life. You know, this built like a sense of camaraderie. But I don't know that everyone else felt that way, you know, and so there was sort of, seemed to me, a culture of bullying. And so it just sort of raises these questions for me again of, like, how do you make it clear when, like, something bad is happening if some people are in on it and think it's okay and you need to just take a joke. That's my story.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for those stories. And one of the things that I want to acknowledge is, well, the first two questions that I asked weren't necessarily that personal. The nature of this topic is people look how quickly we go to what is personal. And I want to go back to encouraging us when we're looking at how we frame some diversity discussions in our workplace. One of the benefits of framing those discussions around bullying is it's a framework that everyone can relate to. It's a framework that everyone can understand. And everyone can agree. You know, there may be disagreement over whether or not we should have marriage equality. There may be disagreement over non-discrimination policies related to gender identity and sexual orientation. But I don't think anybody thinks that a 10-year-old girl, which happened in November, should be so mercilessly teased when she goes to school with a short haircut that she comes home and hangs herself. I don't think anybody believes that when someone goes to work that they should face dangers in the workplace related to who they are and what their identity is. You've heard me in past weeks talk about some of my experiences in working with an agency in Philadelphia. It's a government agency. And during the training sessions, it's been a very frustrating agency to work with. That from the top on down, changing culture is proving more difficult than I've ever seen in anywhere we've ever done training. And one person used a training session that one of my colleagues was facilitating to commit an act of slander about a gay employee and say when we were in the bathroom he tried to look at my penis. And the fear, or nobody believes the employee. The fear, I think this time we talked about fear about people going postal. The fear that people have is what is this person going to do if the person loses a job, and that the person is just that unbalanced. So one of the things that we see, while we automatically go right to examples about school-based bullying, I want to be sure to make us keep taking a look at how that's interwoven into the workplace too. All right, well, let's move from the affective to the cognitive. I'm going to ask each person on our panel to tell us some factual information that we don't already know about bullying. Melissa, would you want to start us on this?
Oh, okay. So I don't know if we don't already know this as a group or not, but I was just looking back into actually a webinar that we did as part of our No Dumb Questions project last year, and at that time we got a sneak preview from Justin Tanis, who's now at Out and Equal, but at that time was at the National Center for Transgender Equality, about the results of their their transgender discrimination survey, and the numbers that he presented about the impacts of bullying on transgender students, young people, adults, were just staggering. So here's some data, for example, that we might not all realize. So of all the people that they interviewed, and it was 2,000 or 3,000 interviewees, 41% of these transgender interviewees reported having attempted suicide, 41%, and 51% if they had been harassed or bullied. And the numbers only go up. The numbers go up still if it turns out that the harasser or bullier was a teacher. So from 51% attempting suicide if they had been harassed or bullied, it was 59% if the teacher was the perpetrator of harassment, 76% if the teacher committed a physical assault, and 69% attempted suicide if it was a sexual assault. And I just thought, for one, it sort of blows my mind that it's so disproportionate, and such a huge percentage of transgender people are experiencing bullying and harassment, but that the impact of that is so significant. Not just in are they staying out of school and able to concentrate and all that, but to risk of life. To also, let me see, I've got some other. They're more likely. If a student is harassed or bullied in school, they are more likely to have lost a job due to bias. 72% reported having lost a job due to bias, or to be unemployed. 68% reported that being their situation. And that actually among transgender people, 78% of the interviewees reported being harassed in school. 78%. 35% physically assaulted and 12% sexually assaulted. And 5% were expelled because of their gender identity from school. So I think, as we talk about the impact on LGBT young people and adults, as you were noting, David, from that song, the boy who wore the dress to school, got the brunt of it, that it really is the transgender among us who are really feeling the worst of this among the LGBT folks.
Wow, some fascinating statistics, and I want to thank you. And I want to just comment on two threads. First of all, I believe that the field of education tends to attract a more sensitive population than we might see on average. But that's not to say that parts of that population can't be incredibly hurtful. And that data illustrates just how very hurtful educators can be. They say things that they should never say. And some data that shows us that the impact of that has real consequences, which is so critical and so important. One of the scenes that hurts me most, maybe because of my profession as an educator, in the movie Bully, is there's a lesbian girl named Kelby, and that's a name that I'm unfamiliar with. And I don't think Kelby looks traditionally female. So when you first show Kelby, the name doesn't give me an identifier of gender. And Kelby's voice and appearance doesn't really tell me male or female. Kelby, in the first moment in the film, refers to herself as gay. So I'm like, okay, Kelby's a boy. And later I realized Kelby identifies as female and identifies as a lesbian. One of her teachers one time, dividing students into groups, says, we're going to break into groups, boys, girls, and Kelby. And to see the harm and danger that educators can do is so very important to be thinking about in one of the populations that we need to reach with some of our development and training. The second piece, Melissa, that I want to echo and thank you for is the transgender inclusion. All too often, the LGBT kind of has a T just sitting there and doesn't necessarily get truly addressed and included. And I want to thank you for being sure that we take a look at that. And last week I spoke a little bit of the case of Cece McDonald in Minneapolis, trans black woman who was coming home and was attacked and had her neck hit with a bottle, needed 11 stitches, and in self-defense stabbed one of her attackers and killed him. And Cece's going to prison. And one of the things that stands out to me most about it is, if we put aside the question about justice for Cece, is for my transgender friends, is the level of vulnerability that I see, because there's an awareness, one, that it could be them, and two, that they can't control the larger factors of hatred and anger that exist in our society, and they need allies and professionals who are going to be sure to do that, to stand up to create some of that cultural change. So thank you very much for that piece, Melissa. That was great.
Sure.
Alana, how about you? Can you? Sure. One of the things that I was reading lately, I think just last week, was a study that was done in 2007 by Bradshaw, Sawyer, and O'Brennan, and they found that school staff's personal experiences with bullying were the best predictors of their attitudes towards bullying and their perceived efficacy towards handling bullying situations. So again, what we're seeing is that people's experiences with bullying as a child definitely do affect their ability to intervene later in life. So I found that very interesting. And the other thing that I had recently read was a study by, a large study actually, by GLSEN, and it was the principal's perspective on school safety and bullying and harassment, and it was, I think, published in 2008. And while half of the public school principals report that bullying and name-calling or harassment of students is a serious problem, but nearly all of the principals reported that while they had safer school or anti-bullying or anti-harassment policies, only 2 in 10 schools have engaged in efforts specifically designed to create a safe environment for LGBTQ students. And the other thing that what really came out of the study was that principals indicate that there is definitely a need for professional development for teachers and staff in order to reduce harassment of LGBT students in their schools. And specifically, 3 out of 10 principals rated their teachers as fair or poor at being able to effectively deal with student bullying. And then 7 in 10 principals believe that professional development is definitely needed in their schools and is not currently occurring. So I found those statistics quite thought-provoking, actually, in my current working environment and working in schools, but also in our expectations with adults intervening. Again, they may be carrying some of the things that they witnessed either as bullies themselves or as victims when they were in school.
Wow. Wow, that is incredible to see. And so what are the implications then for how we prepare teachers, knowing that part of their background has such a big impact? Right,
and I don't think any teacher preparation programs that I know of really go into having educational professionals look at their own background and what it means for how they would intervene in the future and doing role playing and things like that. No program that I know of currently works towards that.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that.
Sure.
That's great to hear. Thank you. And Tammy, how about you? Can you tell us something we don't know about bullying?
I'd like to go back to what Ilana was just talking about. The people who have been bullied or were bullies when they were children are much more aware, and I really believe that because, speaking from personal experience, I'm much more willing to stand up and say, no, this behavior is wrong, and kind of put myself out there because I know what it feels like to be bullied. And I do think that study is accurate just from my personal experience. And I think there's something about bullying that we may not think about, and that's the subtle bullying. Like you have micro inequities with people, diverse groups of people at work. Like you don't get asked to go to golf with the rest of your coworkers, or you don't get asked to go to lunch with coworkers. And I think that subtle bullying can be. I think that bullying can be subtle like that, where it's not so obvious. Not being called names and stuff, but being left out. I guess the cliquish behavior, and you leave somebody out in those behaviors. I think that's something that we probably don't think very much about with bullying.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much for that. Excellent. And that gives us a tie into the workplace that I want us to begin thinking about, and a little bit more concretely. Can we share some examples of bullying and aggressive behavior that we've seen at work? And Tammy, since you already kind of got us going down that road, can you pick up from there?
Yeah, sure. And Melissa, your relative that works in the South may have worked with me at some point. That behavior, the name calling and horsing around and the pranks they pull on each other, that's, I think, pretty common with especially Southern men. And when you say something to them about it, they seem to be offended, like, we're all having fun. And so I don't know if they're all having fun or not, but some of that behavior is truly very aggressive and makes you wonder if they really are enjoying it. And I do think it's a real problem, especially in some of the southern manufacturing sites.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And Ilana, how about you? Can you share some examples?
Sure. One of the things that I typically see, and again speaking about power differences in the workplace, involve supervisors and administrators placing employees in situations that they kind of have to comply, or it's they're questioning, like, at having an ethical dilemma, and then if they don't follow through, is it insubordination? Things like that. I've also seen where there was someone who was in the workplace who, in order to get things done, frequently threatened bodily harm on people. and supervisors were also intimidated by this person. So I've seen kind of a wide range of things that I would consider both bullying and aggressive in the workplace.
All right, thank you for that. Excellent examples. Melissa, do you have anything you want to add to this piece?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to your comment, Tammy. I was smiling when you were saying that about maybe my relative worked with you, and it's what I don't know, what I just found so interesting and kind of befuddling about his impression of how they were all having so much fun, and his real experience of that being the best time of his life, and him feeling so close to all of those coworkers. Is the impact that it had, I feel like, on his ability to empathize. That, we were talking about what was happening with kids being bullied in schools, and just, I don't know. It's sort of this, not just kids will be kids, but, if somebody's, hassling you, stand up for yourself, That's why I carry a gun. If somebody does something to my family, I'll kill them. There's just this, it's a kind of extreme, don't be such a wimp, and stand up for yourself, and, get it done. And, quit your whining. But in the meantime, yeah, I'm going to drop pebbles on you down that deep ditch that you're digging, and I'm going to drop a pebble on you, every 30 seconds for the next hour until you're going so crazy that you're lost your mind down there. They just the sort of horsing around it sounded to me like it was almost torture. It was sort of extreme behavior. But I think it's just there's a ripple effect of when that is the culture of how you create bonds, and it's just, there's likely some people who aren't enjoying it, and do their voices get heard, and then just the effect it has on their sense of, how their children are taking care of themselves and interacting in their social spheres.
Excellent example. Excellent. Thank you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up an example that we've seen in the national news in the past couple of weeks that I would put into the professional isolation category. And that's with the Romney campaign. The Romney campaign hired an openly gay man to be their top foreign policy advisor. And they began to get pushback from some of their more socially conservative constituencies, concerned that they had someone on the campaign who was gay and who supported marriage equality. And they silenced him. They would have meetings, press call meetings, to talk about certain foreign policy issues. And the top advisor was on the phone but unable to speak. And the isolation that he experienced on the campaign was so very painful that he decided to resign. And so we see examples of a concern about a constituency, and this isn't that uncommon from what we see in some workplaces, where you're worried about how a certain constituency is going to respond. And the reality is that people are asked to take the blame in a way that they otherwise would have never been able to ask to take the blame. Okay, let's take a look at our next slide. Okay, if we can take a look at the issue of cyberbullying at schools. Can each person take a moment to vote on cyberbullying? Just give us another moment for all the results to come in. All right, so overall we say that cyberbullying is extremely important. And we need to be able to be very aware of how important cyberbullying is, because this is an issue that affects students in schools, even if it doesn't occur at school. They're on Facebook all day, and they're connecting to these different issues all day, all the time. All right, let's go to our next slide for a moment. We take a minute and vote on this one. How important is cyberbullying at work? All right, we see less so. And, well, when it's important, it's important. It probably affects people at work a little bit less because people at work aren't cyberbullying quite as much because they're not online quite as much as they might be in other situations. All right, let me get us to the next set of questions. And that is, what are some of the ways in which cyberbullying at school or work is having a unique impact? Ilana, can you speak to that at first?
Sure. One of the things that happened actually this school year that I was pretty amazed at, again, how young these things are happening is I had a 5th grade girl who wrote on her Facebook that she thought that one of the other male students was cute. And what ended up happening is that all the other 5th grade students then were calling her a slut and this and that, and it happened actually online, but it also spilled into school. And I was amazed that this type of thing is happening for a 5th grade girl, and that just very surprising. You certainly hear about things happening for older students, but it's starting in elementary school as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Ilana. Mm-hmm. Tammy, can you follow up on that? Talk about school or work?
Yeah, I think there's something about being online that makes you feel anonymous, and it takes away the humanity. If you're face to face with someone, I think it's a little more difficult. Not for some people, of course, but it's a little more difficult to make fun of and call people names. But when you get online, you feel like there's, you're an anonymous person, even if your name and picture are on there. And I think it gives people a sense of power and a sense of they can do anything they want and there are no ramifications. And so I think it dehumanizes people and makes them feel they can say anything they want to others.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Very powerful. We also got a comment in from Nancy. The meanest and most egregious bullying I saw in school was 5th and 6th grade girls. That's a dangerous age. Interesting, one of the things that we see, actually the research that I'm familiar with says that kids on average report the greatest amounts of bullying in grades 7 to 9, the second greatest in grades 4 to 6. If you remember back to when we looked at 2 different types of bullying, in the school bullying model, Nancy, we're going to talk about direct and indirect bullying. Indirect bullying tends to be, the movie Mean Girls is about that, indirect bullying. And indirect bullying tends to be used by girls mostly against other girls. And it often, that emotional piece often can have a bigger impact than being pushed into a locker for an awful lot of kids. It can be particularly painful, the social isolation that people experience. Great. Melissa, do you want to jump in with some examples about cyberbullying?
Yeah, sure. I was going to say some of the same stuff that Tammy was saying about you sort of get to hide behind the veil of being on the computer. And I think it's a similar feeling to me as when I'm somewhat was being on the telephone, but being in my car. Somehow when I'm driving my car, I feel free to talk about people, other people driving their cars in a way that I would never talk to them about them if we were all standing in line together or in the same physical space. So, but I think what's also, I sort of reluctantly gave cyberbullying in the workplace a medium-high score because I don't know if it's true or not, but I would sort of think and hope that adults have enough sense of reputation protection, self-preserving their reputation to not sort of be bullies on Facebook, and that the online communication, the other online communication open to them that would involve a community would be the work email or social network, internal social network, and that they wouldn't do it there. So I kind of wonder if there actually isn't as much of an opportunity for cyberbullying for adults as there is for kids. But the other interesting thing is that a lot of kids today are way more technologically savvy than their parents, and have ways to have all sorts of different Facebook accounts and access to spaces that adults aren't necessarily in. So while adults in the schoolyard aren't necessarily always there when mean things happen, the fact that these ongoing, really rich and deep and complicated and tangled and vicious communities and civilizations are happening online that adults really aren't a part of is kind of frightening, I guess. But also I think maybe a lot of just it's hard to really, as an adult, hard to wrap my mind around. I guess I would I'm sort of curious now to go in, as a 13-year-old or with a 13-year-old and sort of see what goes on there and what sort of things are being talked about. But we don't normally have access to that.
Excellent, excellent. All great points. A few things that I'll throw out there. One, while we obviously hope that adults are going to be more responsible, and on average we might see that, there was a famous case of bullying a couple years ago, back when MySpace was more common, and a teenager was bullied by her girlfriend's mom, is the one who started it, and started a Facebook page pretending to be an attractive boy in a neighboring school who liked her, and encouraged all of her friends or former friends to get online and bully her with that boy after and the girl ended up committing suicide at a time when the state had no cyberbullying laws. So now most adults would be absolutely outraged when they hear that, but it's amazing how irresponsible populations of adults can get. Well, it should not be anywhere nearly as common as we see in the 7th to 9th grade. The other thing I want to note is the research that we've seen about kids in schools shows that cyberbullying is not an equal opportunity offender. The kids most likely to be cyberbullied are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender kids, followed by heterosexual girls. So we don't see cyberbullying. While all kids might become victims of it in one way or another, some populations disproportionately experience some of the pain of it. All right. Our next question, we're getting a little tight on time. We have 3 questions left. Why do bystanders sometimes struggle to intervene? Ilana, can you speak to that?
Sure. Well, I think there's a myriad of reasons, but I think that for actually students, there is a fear of either getting caught in the middle or being bullied as well, or fearing retaliation at a later time. I think that sometimes both children and adults feel that that they may not be able to help the situation, or that they may make the situation worse by intervening. I think also sometimes there's social pressures from peer groups not to intervene, and a lot of times people blame the victim.
Excellent point. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy, can you follow up on that and talk about your thoughts about bystander intervention?
Yeah, I really I agree with Ilana completely. That's basically what I was going to talk about. I think the fear of being made a target, especially in the workplace, if you're going to work with these people for 20 years and you become, ostracized or become a target yourself of bullying, it makes for a pretty miserable work life. And I really think the main reason people don't speak up and intervene is because of that fear of being ostracized.
Excellent. Excellent. And then Melissa, we spoke about this at length last week. Can you interject some of your thoughts about the impact of bystanders here?
Yeah, so last week we talked a lot about the impact of bystanders and just sort of the culture at large, and this notion of being a hero and kind of what it takes to not only sort of be the person who can identify that something bad is actually happening or bad is happening for someone, and then knowing what to do about it. And I guess as far as identifying reasons, I don't know that I have much to add to the great points that Ilana and Tammy already brought up, but I do feel like there's an opportunity here for modeling. This is one thing that I really learned from the school community that I've been doing this documentary with, that they work with kids from kindergarten all through 8th grade, and at developmentally at different developmental stages, they find developmentally appropriate ways to kind of model this being the bystander who intervenes, and giving people a sense for, okay, well, what do you say when, sort of thing. And I think that, as an adult, it's sort of the same problem. It's, okay, well, I could think of something to say, but then everyone's going to think that I'm the jerk and the stick in the mud, or I'll be their target for one reason or another. And if there was a way to be effective, but to do it with a zinger, or to use humor, or something that's disarming and that resolves the situation in whatever way that you feel comfortable doing. I think everyone has a different style and different comfort level with intervening in situations. So I just feel like there's an opportunity for us to kind of re-educate ourselves as adults into finding those ways to intervene that feel most comfortable for us.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. And that's the perfect transition to the next question. What are some model examples of bystander interventions that we can share? Tammy, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a model example, but I have a personal intervention story. I think I've told this to you before, David. I was working at another plant site, and I think it was lunchtime, because there were probably 20 or 25 people out in the smoke area just talking and chatting and enjoying the day, and these two guys started kind of teasing each other, and horseplay back and forth and name calling, and then suddenly one of them looked at the other one and said, "You're a faggot. You're just a faggot. Let me throw you down on the ground and show you what a faggot you are." And there were a couple of people who were actually kind of looking at me like, "Oh my God, she's going to kill somebody." But I just, after I got over, the shock, I said, "Come on, man, leave that word at the gate." And he turned around and looked at me and he said, "Oh man, I am so sorry. I didn't know you were here." And I said, it doesn't really matter. It shouldn't matter whether I'm here or not. You should leave that word at the gate. And so, Melissa, that might be a way to handle it, just kind of not be obnoxious about it, but just say, don't bring that to work. And so, but what really amazed me was later he came to my office and shook my hand and apologized. And we had a really good dialogue about, I said, there are words that are used, directed towards your community, he's African American, that aren't even in my vocabulary, much less something I would say at work. And I think it was a really good opportunity to sit down and educate someone, not only about the LGBT community, but about bullying in general. And so I really enjoyed talking to him after we had that experience.
Excellent. You know what? Part of what's great to hear about that is, there's been a little bit of back and forth you and Melissa have both shared about where more masculine culture is, part of the culture of it, you should be able to take a joke and it's all fun, and that one of the ways to intervene sometimes is he didn't really need to be educated about why it was wrong. He just needed to be reminded that he's saying things that have an impact on people. And frankly, that I assume DuPont has certain policies about that in violation of these. Yeah.
I probably could have gotten him into a lot of trouble, but I felt that was not the right approach. And I think the approach I used was probably the one the company would have preferred as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Great. Okay. Lana, could you go ahead and share some of your perspectives on bystander interventions?
One of the best examples that I've ever seen put into place is a program that they called Circle of Caring. And what they did was recruited people to be volunteers to act as supporters, gave them training, and it was pretty much their job to go out and support people who were being bullied. So it took the guesswork out of, should I intervene, should I not intervene? And it actually gave people permission to intervene. This is my job. My job is to intervene when I see things happening. So that was one of the, that actually is the best example that I've ever seen put into practice, like a program in which people volunteer to be trained and act as supporters.
Excellent. That's great to hear, and great to think about what are some workplace adoptions of those models that we can take a look at.
Absolutely.
As well. And then Melissa, you kind of transitioned us into this. Do you have anything else you want to add to it, or did you feel like you kind of?
No, really. I think I think a lot of the stuff that we talked about in, last week was sort of the at the basic skill level, like being assertive and having empathy and realizing when something's inappropriate and how to take action and all of that. But I really I'm so glad to hear these specific examples. And again, I just think it could be a really interesting time to try to surface some of these best practice stories and anecdotes and sort of collect a group of these. How did you do it, and how did you handle this, so that folks can kind of find their own zone of comfort and whatever kind of approaches are appropriate for their workplace and themselves.
Excellent. Excellent. Right. Then I have one last question before we have a little bit of time for questions from those who have been patiently listening to our panel. And what are some things we can do to change corporate culture to reduce bullying at work? Or it doesn't have to be corporate culture, it could just be workplace culture. Elena, do you want to start on this one?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that I have seen done also effectively is creating a recognition award for those who are looking out for others, and just incorporating that into the workplace. That is a monthly award that given when you are looking out for someone else. And the other thing that I have also seen is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, is also holding bystanders accountable for being present and not doing something to assist in situations as well.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for that. Tammy, how about you?
Yeah, our company actually does hold bystanders accountable. That's a part of the ethics. We go through an ethics training every year, and if you see something wrong and don't report it, you're just as guilty. And I think a lot of companies are going to that. And another thing we have is a respect for people training, and I think it's a really good program. It's more of a self-reflective type training, like how would I feel if this was me? And I think companies are becoming more aware of it, and I just think it's important for employees and their employers to start talking about it and not pretend it's not an issue, because it really is an issue. And I think the more we talk about it and the more programs like this we have, I think we're going to make a difference.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that. And Melissa, how about you?
As a filmmaker, I tend to be biased towards the power of media. So I'm sitting here thinking about, for one, the one thing that I've spent a lot of my life with in the last 10 years is our No Dumb Questions project, which includes a couple of documentary films and an online experiment for people to ask their own questions and tell their own stories. And that's all, because I'm so involved in that, it seeps into my personal life, and people like to make jokes with me when, we're out at the bar or something about, but there's no dumb questions about that. And so it's kind of changed the, sort of cloud of culture that I carry around me personally, and has seeped into other people in my life to take more of a no dumb questions attitude. And I think that approaches like that are kind of at the core of disarming behaviors and attitudes that turn into things like bullying. So I think that just these general sort of attitude shifts. And then also I was listening to an interview with a woman talking about the lack of women in science and engineering, and that what we need to do is change the way women are portrayed and the way actually science and engineering is portrayed, so it all just looks more interesting and exciting. And I think, and I've been thinking about a similar sort of thing with the It Gets Better campaign, that it's very aspirational and a very positive message, but I wonder when we're going to start to see more sort of anti-bullying superheroes, or more like Charlie's Angels kicking bullying butt, like really make the kids and the adults who are feeling like, sort of the victims or the recipients of this kind of behavior to just like automatically go to a place of empowerment and just know that that's the thing that they can do, and have all the bystanders know that that's the thing that they should do, and have those sort of role models out more in the popular culture.
Excellent. Excellent. Great. Thank you for that. All right, and folks, that leads us through my questions, and it opens us up. We're going to unmute the lines to get questions from those who
The conference has been unmuted.
Here we go, David. Everybody's unmuted now.
Excellent. So at this point, just feel free to speak up if you have a question. Go ahead, just start if you get to introduce yourself, and then direct the question to whomever you'd like.
David, real quick, this is Pat. Are we getting any data about kind of globally what's happening, or is this mostly a U.S. phenomenon? I know it gets better kind of goes that way.
It's a great question. And I'll ask others to jump in for what they've seen. The school-based data that we see all actually started in Norway. And when we started adopting the model in Norway, the Alveus model, we found fairly similar data here that we find there. Maybe not as relates to diversity, but in terms of frequency and interventions and things like that. Norway, we're dealing with a society that in many ways is just becoming diverse in terms of race and has a better history than we do about diversity in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity. But where women have had certainly their own struggles, significant struggles in many ways. So we've seen a lot of parallels, but I wouldn't call it global, but I would call it Western. Do any other panelists want to jump in if they've seen anything beyond the research I'm familiar with? Okay, excellent question, Pat. How about some others?
Sounds like you may have answered them all for everybody, David. And we're coming close on time. You got about 2 minutes left if you want to do any closing comments.
Sure, I'm going to go last. So Melissa, do you want to share any closing comments that you have?
No, I think I'm good. I again just really appreciate this opportunity to have this conversation and anticipate that it's not the end of the conversation, and I look forward to more great examples for how we can change from bullying cultures in our schoolyards and workplaces. More of those conversations coming soon.
Good. Tammy?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I really appreciate the invitation to be involved in this, and I enjoy both of your all's work. It's been really interesting to find out all the work that you have done and continue to do, trying to protect especially our children, but our coworkers as well. So I appreciate being involved.
Excellent. Ilana?
Yes. Also want to thank you for the opportunity to get my voice out there, but also to hear a lot of good ideas, and a lot of things that I've heard in these sessions have inspired me to keep my wheels spinning, and my mind is active on other things that I can maybe get into in order to support victims and work on bullying in the places that I work.
Excellent. Excellent. Great. And I want to thank everyone for being a part of this team to work on it. It's always a pleasure to partner with Pat and Q at Unequal and to partner with this outstanding panel for today and Melissa throughout the series. I just want to close by acknowledging that one of the messages that I try to drive home as much as possible with what I do is that diversity is part of our job. Bullying prevention is part of our job. And that as much as we get people to understand that, is as much as we move into changing school and corporate culture. So on that note, I'll turn things over to Pat with any announcements that you may have.
Great. Thank you, David, and thank you, Melissa, for your presentation. And also, Lana and Tammy, thank you for joining us on the panel today, and hope Chris feels better soon. As soon as we close the webinar, there will be a course feedback form, so go ahead and send that out to us. I did send out a link to all of the links that David had mentioned. support the material today, and then we'll send it up in the follow-up as well. But you can take a look at that. We're also going to do a shorter version of this on the 31st. So if there's information that you found valuable or you want to pass this on to anyone you work with, that's a free call, and we'll be able to kind of highlight some of this information and dig a little bit more into the workplace part of it. And, of course, our next Out in Equal University course will be starting on June 5th on leadership coaching for LGBT careers. So, again, thank you very much. And any more questions, please contact me or Q, and we'll see you soon. And